Hey, the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency. But they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families. And they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization, doing great stuff all around the state. Hey, everybody, this is the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit. Thank you very much. We are broadcasting live from Mackinac Island at the Mackinac Policy Conference hosted by the Detroit Regional Chamber. My guest right now, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Craig.
And I'll tell you what, as you were walking over here, I saw somebody give you a hug and said, oh my God, the best Attorney General we've ever had. It's only been a few months. But this reaction, this changeover in the office that we have seen, I mean, what a difference an election makes, obviously. But have you been getting a lot of that?
Well, it's just that I have a very different philosophy than the two Republicans who preceded me in that office. And I think for a lot of people it is a refreshing change, My perspective on the role of the Michigan Attorney General is to be as proactive as possible in terms of protecting residents all around the state. So whether I'm filing suit against pharmaceutical companies trying to bring down the price of generic medication, whether I'm going after folks that abuse or neglect or economically exploit seniors in our state, or whether I'm just trying to protect the environment, those are things that we just didn't see for a very long time. And I think people are excited to see some new, fresh blood and a new perspective on that office.
You've also, though, taken on some issues that have been politically difficult in Michigan. The Enbridge Line 5 issue, for one. You've taken a very proactive stance on that. You've been very aggressive when it comes to your interpretation of the law as what happened in Lame Duck last time around in terms of ballot signatures and things like this. The Attorney General does have the ability to make some sort of rulings. Do people understand what it actually does, though, in terms of the force of law and things along those lines?
Right. Yeah, I mean, the office comes with great power and great authority. There's no question about that. It's one of the things that made it very appealing to me because I didn't see a lot of movement in the legislature in regard to things that I thought were important. But there was a lot that I thought could be done through the Office of Michigan Attorney General to really improve and enhance the lives of people all around their state. And I'm trying as hard as I possibly can to make sure that happens.
High-profile stuff that you've done already, too. The clergy abuse lawsuit that was brought the other day, charges there. I think a lot of people were like, a little bit shocked by this. Nobody really wants to confront this, but talk about confronting it head on in this way and say, you know what, we are going to charge these people. This is not something we're going to allow to be swept under the rug or people to be reassigned, as we've seen in so many other instances.
Well, as you know, this investigation actually started under my Republican predecessor, Bill Schuette, and last October in 2018, they executed 7 different search warrants in dioceses all around the state and confiscated hundreds of thousands of documents in regard to that. So I'm merely continuing the investigation that was already started.
Sure.
But, when we dived into it and, when we started to look at what was really there, and established this tip line that people could call in on, I mean, the magnitude, the scope of the problem was frankly horrifying to me. And what we discovered is what I believe to be hundreds and hundreds of victims, could go into the thousands, actually. Now, a lot of those cases we can't prosecute, unfortunately, either because the statute of limitations has run, or in some cases the priests are simply deceased at this point. But, we're talking about an institution that permitted child abuse and sexual assault to proliferate. And, what I think the victims need more than anything is to know that these predators are just not going to get away with what they did to them, in so many cases ruining the lives of these people forever, and that they're going to be held accountable. And that's the kind of justice that I think victims need. But more so than that, if there are dangerous pederasts that are on the streets, we need to take them off the streets. We need to protect future victims, make sure that future victims are not made because we're holding these folks accountable.
Does this in a way, though, I mean, if you look at in the wake of the Michigan State situation as well, with Dr. Nasser and the way that the institution handled that, and you go back to Penn State, is there a message that is being sent with the prosecution like this one to all organizations that, look, come clean, own up to your mistakes, figure this stuff out, or else you're going to be in similar situations.
Well, that's really exactly the message that I hope to send to them. And what we've seen in document after document is when the hierarchy in some of these dioceses would learn of the types of allegations that were being made, the go-to move was never, we better contact the authorities. It was always, well, what are we going to do about this? And, how do we make certain that this doesn't come to light? How do we convince the victim not to speak up and move forward on this? And where do we put this wayward clergy member so that they're moved to another location? And what do we have to do to buy off this victim? And the message that I want to send is, whether it's Michigan State, whether it's any of these dioceses, that is not going to be enough. It's not going to be appropriate. And if you are in any way complicit, if you are an aider and abetter in a sexual assault, you too will be held accountable.
Attorney General Dana Nessel, my guest right now. Yesterday, you said, hey, I ran on shutting down Line 5. Protesters obviously were greeting us as we pulled into the docks yesterday. A lot of people up in this part of the state very, very concerned about the potential impact of if something happens to Line 5. What's the option here? What do you think can happen in regards to Line 5 and how it should proceed?
Well, I think we need to keep repeating the point over and over again that a very small amount of the fuel that comes through Line 5 ever goes to services to service the residents of our state. And the estimates are that it's only between 5 and 10% of anything that comes through that line actually goes to Michigan residents. The vast majority of it it's a Canadian oil company that services Canadian citizens. And we are merely a conduit where that pipeline passes through. But unfortunately, we here in Michigan have to absorb all the risk. So we're looking at what could very potentially be the biggest oil spill in American history in the event that both pipelines rupture via an anchor strike or something of that nature. And we know that there have been multiple anchor strikes over the years.
Sure.
It's time to shut it down. There are so many different ways that we can make certain that people in the UP get the propane they need and that we replace any of the fuel that has gone to our state residents. And it's time for our state legislature to get moving on that. And let's find alternative methods. But to, put the Great Lakes at such risk and to have a situation where potentially our state never, ever will recover from the magnitude of the economic damage, the damage to our natural resources, the poisoning of our drinking water, I'm not okay with that. And I'm ready to move forward.
Now, one of the options that was being peddled, obviously, before you were elected, was this notion of a tunnel underneath, and basically create a tunnel to put the lines under there, so they're not just sitting on the lake bed. You argued, though, that the authority that they created to make this happen was unconstitutional. Do you still agree with that? I mean, is this authority? They don't have the power, basically, to do this infrastructure project in your mind?
It's not that they don't have the power to do it, per se. That particular piece of legislation, the Mackinac Corridor Authority legislation, was, as you know, rushed through. It was amended multiple times at the last minute. I'm not really even certain that the people who voted on it had an opportunity to read it all the way through. And it was defective from a constitutional perspective in a variety of ways. I stand by that opinion. I have every confidence that that opinion is going to be upheld in a court of law if and when it's challenged. But whether or not a tunnel is a good idea, I might not personally believe it's a good idea, but I'm not a policymaker, and it's up to the legislature and it's up to the governor to make that decision. But here's what it is incumbent upon me to do. I have to defend the Michigan Constitution. The Michigan Constitution calls for the protection of the Great Lakes and our natural resources, and even more specifically, our drinking water. As far as I'm concerned, Enbridge is violating the law, and it is my job, it's my obligation, it's my responsibility to enforce the law, and I plan to do it.
Well, we're sort of bouncing around topics a little bit because I only have you for a few more minutes, but I do want to ask about this. You joined 22 other states, a coalition of 22 states, in suing the Trump administration over some of the religious exemptions that they're trying to put in the law. Talk a little bit about the problem you had with that, and is the changes that he's making, is it incompatible with, in your mind, the U.S. Constitution or also Michigan's?
Both, as a matter of fact. The fact is, this is the most flagrant violation of church and state that I have ever seen. The First Amendment was always intended to act as a shield to to protect people from being discriminated against. But instead, the Trump administration has decided to use it as a sword to skewer the rights of others. So basically, what this new rule promulgated by the Department of Health and Human Services would do is it would allow all medical personnel, and not just people who actually are doctors or nurses or pharmacists, but I mean even if you work at a doctor's office, you could be a receptionist at a doctor's office. And if you have any kind of religious belief that in you think any way, shape, or form conflicts with either a particular service that a doctor's office or a hospital would provide, or a particular person that you don't want to provide that service to, you can simply refuse to do it. And I'm talking about, it means prescribing birth control, prescribing HIV medication, or even if a woman is suffering from an ectopic pregnancy and she's literally bleeding to death, you can have staff at a hospital say, I'm going to refuse to perform a life-saving measure. And even though there's no way that that pregnancy is viable, if it's an ectopic pregnancy, you have to die if you have people who work at that hospital that just say, I don't feel comfortable performing a procedure to save your life on your ectopic pregnancy. I mean, it's horrific to think that even a receptionist at a doctor's office could literally say, hey, what are you coming in for? Well, I'd like to get a refill on my birth control prescription. And that receptionist can say, well, then I'm not going to make an appointment for you. And not only are there no repercussions to them, but the Department of Health and Human Services is talking about cutting off funding to our state unless we expressly permit medical personnel to behave in this fashion. I mean, it's taking us back to The Handmaid's Tale. It's crazy.
Well, so much of this debate, though, has been framed around the issue of whether or not somebody has to bake a cake for a gay wedding, as opposed to this. When you start putting it in these sort of terms and people start thinking about the potentially life-altering choices that somebody could make in terms of their religious freedom, where is the debate right now? And I mean, are we getting it right? Are we talking about the right things? In terms of getting people to understand what is actually being done here.
Well, I'm trying to talk about the right things, and I'm trying to make it crystal clear to people. And I want people to understand it's as simple as, somebody filling out a form in a doctor's office that indicates with their marital status that they're divorced. And the ability of the doctor to say, well, I don't believe in divorce. That violates my religious principles. I'm not going to treat you. I mean, think about how scary that is for anybody to be able to do that, to know that they can't be fired for that, and to know that actually, if they are fired, that our state could lose funding. I mean, it's terrifying, and I'm going to do everything in my power as Michigan Attorney General to fight as vigorously as I can against these kinds of rules and to ensure that our nation does not, devolve into a virtual theocracy.
Well, we'll have to leave it right there for now. We will talk again. Attorney General Dana Nessel, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
This is the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit.